James Creedon, wired up and ready to go here for Media Watch. Good to see you, sir.
Likewise, Mark.
The French Parliament has adopted a controversial new anti-terror law, enshrining many of the aspects of the state of emergency into our everyday existence.
Right.
You've got the reactions on social media.
Yes, so a lot of reactions to this. We'll start with Emmanuel Macron's Twitter account, because there's an attempt, of course, to frame this as obviously a positive development. And he said in this tweet, it's a quote from that speech he gave, I said very early on that I wanted us to get out of this state of emergency. And as of the 1st of November, we will be getting out of the state of emergency. And the hashtag there is a state that protects. And this is kind of echoing what he said in his first televised interview on Sunday, that as the head of state, his top priority is to protect the citizens. Mm-hmm. Security is his number one priority. Now, some people picking up on that and saying, yes, hashtag a state that protects, bravo. We feel this particular Twitter user going by @SoEthereal says protection. We are being protected while staying within a state of law and without going into a sort of a permanent state of emergency. Bravo. It's so kind of congratulatory that you'd almost wonder if it's not somebody from La République En Marche sort of writing it.
Took the words right out of my mouth, James.
It just seems a little bit too adulatory. Anyway, others are adapting that hashtag. You can see the hashtag that is being pushed is a state that protects, an état qui protège. Some are putting a little spin on that. An état qui oppresse, a state that oppresses. And this word, kind of a very interesting French word that comes back a lot when it comes to these sort of discussions. Liberticide. The killing of freedom.
The killing of freedom.
It's not a word that has a direct translation in English, but they're saying we're entering into, this particular tweet says we're entering into a permanent regime of freedom killing.
Because this is enshrining many of the factors that are present in the state of emergency, isn't it? We're not going back to how things were before.
Right.
But I suppose some people would argue that society isn't the same as it was before either. Things have changed.
It's a big debate. It really is a big debate. And I suppose certainly when you see the news coming out of the UK yesterday, well, at least what MI5 chief is saying, that the real risks right now, the real terror risks are perhaps greater than ever before. Just very quickly to mention that there's many opposed, even though La République En Marche, you can see it there, the red hexagon in the centre represented by all of the, the huge majority that they have. You did have in black there several opposition sort of formations opposing this law, but some were opposing it for the reason that they think it didn't go far enough in terms of extending the state of emergency for longer, that really the risks are very high. This is Eric Ciotti of the Conservative Party. So people opposing it for a range of reasons.
Go far enough.
Yeah, okay, that's it. Okay. So damned if you do and damned if you don't, I suppose, in the case of some of this.
Okay, so on the whole, though, big public support, is that what we're seeing?
Well, apparently, it's something like 96% of the population are in favour of either the state of emergency or some sort of measures that would protect them. I suppose people are very conscious of the risks. Right?
Having lived through what people have lived through here, it's something that you want to make sure that you are protected.
That's right.
So I can see where Macron's coming from with the hashtag and all that, but,
But if you talk to legal experts, human rights law experts, they are understandably unhappy with these sort of developments. Now, Le Monde spoke to this particular legal expert at the Collège de France. Her name is Mireille Delmas-Marty, and she gave some interesting quotes to Le Monde. She said, we're moving from a state of law to a state of surveillance. And she went on to say that if you go back to the 1980s when security and terrorism laws were kind of being introduced, she said you would think, looking at those speeches in Parliament and the talking points, that we were now in a completely different universe compared to where we were 80 years ago. She said from the 70s onwards, you would have thought that the rise in the power of kind of human rights law and also that the state of law generally was a kind of an unshakable dogma, just a certainty. And she said now we have entered into, really since I suppose 9/11, that's everybody sees that as a key turning point, a shift towards sort of a drifting away from the state of law, states kind of almost the legitimization of the use of torture methods and whatnot. And just some other articles kind of echoing the same.
There's no implication of torture being introduced in France, though, is there?
No,
let's just get them on out the way.
That was related to Guantanamo.
Yeah, sure.
You have The Guardian here. It's similar kind of, they interviewed several people from the UN. Fionnuala Ní Éileán, who's a special UN reporter, said that the bill contains provisions that could harm the rights to liberty, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. Another UN rapporteur, Michel Faust, said that this is kind of creating a permanent emergency situation. I'll finish.
That aspect of freedom of assembly, though, I mean, if all the assembly is on the internet,
yeah,
via encrypted sites.
And I suppose
how on earth can that have any impact?
That's true. And I suppose if you look too at the criticism that things have shifted so much since 1980, well, indeed, the internet wasn't even developed in 1980, so necessarily things have shifted. Just an editorial. This is, I suppose, the debate that keeps coming back every time, isn't it? This is just one editorial I found online. Liberty versus security. What is the balance to find? It's the never-ending, I suppose, debate.
It's the question every time, isn't it?
In this regard, they spoke to one lawyer and defender of human rights law, William Bourdon, who is critical of this law as well. I think really any kind of legal thinkers in this regard who have an interest in human rights law are concerned. And he said, when it is a question, or when the issue becomes dangerousness over guilt, we're going to see abuses of the legal system as you move forward, and I suppose certainly the role of the justice system, that particular branch of government, is being weakened with laws like this in terms of
it's one of the things, because
due process.
If it was the leader of another country, pick any country you like, there would be a lot of criticism from us on this channel of what they were doing, I imagine, because it's a clamping down on people's human rights and their freedom to associate, their liberties and stuff.
That's right.
However, this context, it is different, but nonetheless, you can see where the human rights aspect is coming from and the concerns on that.
There were some suggestions that there could be built into this law a sort of a timeout, if you like, or that it would time itself out, say, in 2020, imagining that perhaps the security situation might have calmed down between now and then, and that there would be some mechanism where you would come back to some prior greater balance. I'm not sure what the situation is in that regard. I know it's been suggested. And
I can hear the security experts saying the terror threat has evolved so much that it needs to be approached in a different way. It is a strong thing we could talk about all night. James.
I'll just leave you with this
very
image,
quickly,
Mark.
go ahead.
It's always put on social media when there's a debate like this, the freedom versus security issue, and if you kind of give more sway to security, it can end up gobbling Lady Liberty there.
It's
the risk.
It's funny, but it's hard to laugh at.
Yes.
James, thank you very much indeed. James Creedman, Media Watch. Kate with the